all-knowing and all-powerful, starting with the elderly wolf uncle. Chapter 67. Yes. Coulson received the order, answered it, and then turned and walked away quickly. He also has Nick in his heart. Fury was just as skeptical. I can't help but be anxious. Meanwhile, Delanhay Manor, in the villa, in one of the rooms. In the quiet and dim room, the space suddenly gave birth to ripples like water waves. A spatial passage opens. Then, Chen Tian walked out of it, down to earth, and the passage disappeared. He looked at the familiar room and took a deep breath. He's back. It's only been 2 days, but I always feel that everything is completely different. Chen Tian looked at his palm and muttered. But the words that came out of his mouth were not only exclamations, but also facts. This time, Chen Tian only stayed in the 600th world for a short period of 2 days, but he gained a lot. The whole person can even be described as reborn. Chen Tian, who has copied the bloodline and most of the abilities of the great super Kryptonian, can already deal with many crises in the current Marvel world and on Earth. In time, Chen Tian will develop his strength to the peak level and advance to a higher latitude, which is not vain. After that, the Earth crisis, which needs to be assembled by the Avengers to survive, I am afraid that he alone will be enough to settle it. Knock. Then, there was a knock outside the door of Chen Tianfang. Click. Then the door was opened. I sensed it as soon as you came back. Professor Charles slowly entered in a wheelchair, with a kind smile on his face, looking at Chen Tian. Welcome home. Quote. When the words fell, he did not continue to ask Chen Tian where he had been in the past 2 days. After all, everyone has their own secrets. Although Professor Charles can read everyone's thoughts, he is the one who respects other people's secrets the most. Or in other words, as he has survived for so long and has seen countless mutants, he does not care at all whether the person who is a companion has some secret to hide from him. He has the ability to sense the emotions of the other party. As long as the heart is still on the side, that's enough. When Chen Tian heard this, he also smiled. Good evening, Professor Charles. Logan, have you been to any of them lately? Everyone stayed in the manor well in the past 2 days, and they didn't go anywhere. Professor Charles thought for a moment and said with a slow smile, without you, the little ones don't dare to run around. Quote. Rogan's words, he should be drunk in a bar not far from the manor by now. When the two people talked, their tones were both gentle, like a pair of ordinary grandchildren pulling homely things. Pedal one by one at this time. There was another sound of hurried footsteps outside the door. It's only been a few days since I met, and 2 little guys have become dependent on you. Professor Charles sensed the people running towards the room, and suddenly smiled even more. The words fell. 2 large and small figures appeared at the door. Chen. Wanda held the door frame and saw Chen Tian, her sapphire-like eyes lit up slightly, and her little face suddenly turned red with excitement. Laura was silent. I haven't seen you for 2 days, where have you been? Wanda came over and glared wide-eyed at the latter. I went out and did some things. Chen Tian responded. Wanda didn't ask much, just nodded. After all, she knew that Chen Tian's identity was special and she had a lot to do. Laura raised her head and glanced at Wanda, glancing at the other party's loose pajamas with some dissatisfaction. Take note of this. She frowned unmovingly, and rested her small chin on Chen Tian's shoulder again. His gaze was stunned. I don't know what I'm thinking. Huh. Professor Charles chuckled and continued, everyone has been staying in the manor for the past 2 days, and they all feel a little bored. Quote. If you come back and have nothing to do, you can take a few children out and around. Chen Tian put down Laura when he heard this, and nodded, there is no problem. With his current strength, even if he goes out, not many people can stop him. When Wanda watched Chen Tian's actions, she reluctantly let go of her hand. Until after hearing behind him. Both girls immediately looked happy. Great. I haven't even seen New York yet. Thank you, Chen. Wanda happily hugged Chen Tian head on. Behind her, Laura stared at her back, and the corners of her mouth that had just been hooked up flicked, and she didn't seem so happy. Then, treadling. A slight sound of footsteps suddenly sounded from Chen Tian's ears. The footsteps of the walker were very light, obviously professionally trained, but with the Krypton bloodline, Chen Tian, who had 5 keen senses, still captured the voice. At the same time, he possessed psychic abilities and sensed a burst of hostility. Chen Tian's gaze suddenly froze, and his body tightened. Someone infiltrated the estate. What's wrong? Wanda noticed Chen Tian's change and obediently let go of her hand. There are guests coming. Professor Charles next to him also sensed hostility. Bang! Logan's figure ran in through the door and pushed it open. Guys, get ready. When I entered the manor just now, I saw the SHIELD car. Damn it, they must have come at us. Quote. At first, he thought that Chen Tian had not returned yet, and he shouted loudly as soon as he entered the hall of the villa. Then his nose moved, and he noticed Chen Tian's smell. Logan's eyes lit up. A few steps ran to the door of Chen Tian's room. Chen, it turns out that you are back. He saw that Chen Tian's face had become gloomy. What are we going to do now? Logan asked in a deep voice. At this time, he already had some trust in Chen Tian. I was not annoyed that after coming to New York, I was targeted again. It seems that Nick Fury didn't realize the seriousness of the matter. Chen Tian squinted slightly, his eyes flashing with a dangerous luster, and muttered to himself. Then, he looked at the others present and smiled a little relaxed. Don't worry, just leave it to me to solve it. Chapter 1 Previous Chapter 67 186 Next chapter End Table of Contents